Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to a new episode of One Mic where I watch shit so you don't have to. Today I'm here to talk about the entire series of Schitt's Creek. Give you a little bit of background about this. I've heard about the show on and off for the past maybe like a year or so, give or take. I did a podcast on the Daily DVR Podcast Network. I encourage all you guys to check that out if you are somebody watching this video that is unfamiliar, but I did a podcast on the Daily DVR Podcast Network where we ran over. It was probably like, it was maybe like 4 or 5 of us, and we ran down our top 10 shows of the year. And several people on this podcast put Schitt's Creek in their top 10. And the reason that's significant is because I'm not a big fan of comedies. I could not see me ever putting a comedy in my top anything. Just because of like, when I think of like my top shows, I'm thinking of like, stuff like Sons of Anarchy and Game of Thrones and The Leftovers, like these things that carry some weight, some heft, some drama, some tension, some powerhouse acting, like, all these sorts of things are the things that I value in my television. And I could never see me putting a comedy in the same field as those sorts of shows. My favorite comedies are like The Simpsons. I watch The Simpsons nonstop as a child / teenager / adult / middle-aged man. But I'd say like the first 10 seasons of The Simpsons are like the best. I don't think the first 10 seasons of The Simpsons will ever be topped as far as just like sheer comedic brilliance, right? But and I watch like The Fresh Prince and stuff like that. And as much as I love those shows, if somebody says, "Hey, list the 10 best shows that you've ever watched" or something like that, I don't know if I would end up listening to The Simpsons or The Fresh Prince. I mean, I might, but it'd be toward the lower end just because I don't really do comedies like that. So to have so many people say that the Schitt's Creek was in their top 10 for TV shows in 2020 kind of piqued my interest a little bit. I had already started the show by that point just because of the Emmys, I think, that had happened where Schitt's Creek won everything. I'd never seen that before, where a single television show swept every award. Because what are the odds of that, really? Like, you can have a phenomenal television show, but you have just like kind of like run-of-the-mill acting performances, or maybe you get great acting performances out of your main characters, and then some of your secondary ones, it's kind of like whatever, right? To have a show win, like, not just like the best comedy show, but to have every actor, the best actor, best actress, supporting actors, like all of these people win, I was like, man, this show must be actually pretty special. So I started it. I got probably I was maybe, I think probably in the second season when we did this podcast that I talked about earlier, where we talked about the top 10 shows. And at that point, I was into the show. Like, I thought it was funny, but I was still not in a place where I'm like, okay, this is like, one of the best comedies I've ever seen, or this is in my top 10 shows of 2020. I was not in that place. So I was curious to where this was going to go. Now, fast forward to, I'd say the past week or two, maybe. I was already aware of where my opinion was going to fall on Schitt's Creek, and I kind of wanted to just see how things would play out. And over the course of that time, I'd say this is probably after I watched season 4 out of 6, by the way. After I'd watched season 4, I felt like I had a pretty good idea of where I was going, how I felt about this show, so that when it came time to record this video, I had a pretty good idea of what I was going to say about the show. And I spent the last however long it took me to get through seasons 5 and season 6 thinking about how I was going to articulate that when I got in front of you guys, what I was going to say, how I felt about it. And I'm still not quite there, but I finished the show last night, and I need to put the video out. I've been thinking about recording this video. I've been wanting to record this video. I put a really strong push on my wife to help, make sure that we finish this series so that I could do this video. And now here I sit, having finished the series, not quite sure what to say about it. I wrote down some notes down here that are just kind of like talking points or just overarching kind of like things that I want to touch on. But when I'm doing these videos, I don't really like to look at my notes. I try to, look in the camera as much as I can. But I really try not to be hyperbolic, but Schitt's Creek is now probably one of my favorite shows of all time, let alone the best comedy or anything like that. It is flawless. I have not seen anything done in comedy like this show. And now, granted, I'm not a big comedy guy, so maybe some of you guys are listening and you're like, yo, you like Schitt's Creek, whatever the fuck is way better. I doubt that, but it's a hilarious show, right? But what sets that apart? You can have hilarious shows. There's a million of them on, right? But I think what makes Schitt's Creek special is it takes a kind of tropey kind of concept, like this fish out of water concept, and it gives you that to start with in a very humorous fashion. But what it becomes and what it grows into is something so special and so remarkable to me, to see these characters evolve into the people that they become. And what this allows you to do is this allows you to have big emotional moments toward the final, say, 2-3 seasons of the show. This allows you to have some really big moments that you couldn't get if you don't flesh these characters out like this and give these characters some heart and some personality, and make them their own, to where it's like, okay, now you know who this person is and who this person is, and what kind of behavior you can expect from them. So when you see these certain scenes that are just really remarkable, I can't even really articulate how powerful some of these scenes were. And to have this in a comedy is, I've never seen anything like this. I heard a lot of people say they were crying during various parts of the show, and that never happened to me. But that's not to say that this is not a show that will cause one to shed tears. I'm just not much of a crier, but there were, I'd say, at least probably a good 5 or 6 moments that I sat there. I'm like, this is incredibly powerful work that these actors are doing right now, and I am thoroughly impressed. And were I not so soulless of a human being, I'd be crying too, just like everyone else. But what this show does, I mean, this does amazing work for, like, just, I think from the perspective of the LGBT community, or LGBTQ community, what this has done as far as like how you portray these characters, or how these actors portray these different characters and these different situations and these relationships that they enter into, and the various pitfalls and the ebbs and flows of like how these things can operate. I've never seen this depicted in such a wholesome way. It never feels heavy-handed. Like, just to give you guys like a brief kind of like peek into what I'm talking about here, is one of the characters eventually enters into a homosexual relationship with another man. And how many times have we seen that in TV and film? Like, it's fairly common at this point. It's not, but it's oftentimes put in a way where it's like, hey, look what we're doing here. Like, look at how we are look at how we're showing two guys kiss. Like, oh yeah, that's so crazy, right? And it feels almost kind of like disingenuous, where it's like, hey, let's interject some of this in here, and in a fashion to make us look forward thinking or something like that. Like, hey, we did this thing, check us out. And what Schitt's Creek did differently is that nothing here feels forced. It feels very natural and very genuine, to where it's like, I never, you can watch and obviously you see these are two men kissing, right? But I never looked at the relationship between these two characters as a gay relationship or as two men in a relationship. I never qualified it as in a sexuality sort of way. It's just a beautiful like relationship and a partnership, and it's something that like you just can't do that without really putting in work on these characters. And I found it interesting that I could watch these scenes and watch these moments and find them powerful and find them moving, and I'm not sitting here thinking there's no asterisks there like, oh, this is moving for a gay relationship, or this is, nothing like that. It's just like, this is beautiful stuff. Like, these actors this was such good work that, and I haven't looked it up yet, but these two actors did such good work that I want to look it up and see if they are actually together in real life, because I'd almost be disappointed if they weren't, because I'm like, how are you guys doing this? Like, you got me watching this, like I'm in love with their relationship. I'm sitting here like, yo, I want to date this motherfucker. Like, this is the perfect man right here, man. And it's amazing what they do. So like I just felt like it was so powerful, it was so impactful, it was so emotional. Beautiful moments between these two characters, and I just respect that so much. I watched this kind of like after special kind of thing, like a season wrap up kind of thing, where they just kind of went through the final days of the production on the series, and they read a letter that was sent to Dan Levy, who is, I believe he's like the primary writer on the show. He's Eugene Levy's son. He also plays his son on the show. And they read this letter from these moms that are parents of LGBTQ children. And it was signed by like 1,800 people. And I can't recite the letter off the top of my head or anything like that. But basically the letter said, like, you know, they thanked him for his portrayal of LGBTQ characters and their relationships within the show. And I am watering it down. This was a incredibly powerful letter, and the whole table's crying while one of the actors is reading this. And you can't blame them one bit. Like, how could you not feel like touched by having 1,800 parents tell you how your show has had a positive impact on the lives of their children, when especially the actor in general must know what that's like, how tough that is as a child or as a teenager, as an adult, to come out of the closet to your parents or to your friends or whoever it may be, and to have that many people go, you know, we respect and admire what you have done for our community. Like that's so powerful to me. And seeing them cry, I was like, man, this is just heavy shit. Like, they've done such great work on this show. So I'm not going to harp on that aspect of it any further, but that is why, for me, I don't give a fuck what other comedy you like or that you watched or whatever I do not care. For me, my recommendation to you, because this is the purpose of this channel, is assuming you trust my opinion, me saying I like this thing or I don't like this thing, and you use that to decide whether or not you want to watch it. So for me, this is the best comedy I've ever seen, and it is in my it is among, I don't have a placement for it, but like I said at the top of the show, or at the top of this video, it would be so hard for me to place a comedy amongst things like Game of Thrones or Sons of Anarchy or Justified or anything like that, or The Leftovers. But were I to make such an all-time TV list, Schitt's Creek would be very, very, very high on it, and would be the highest ranked comedy. And Schitt's Creek is a show that you will never hear me say add the qualifier for a comedy or of a comedy. Schitt's Creek is one of the best shows I've ever seen. And to say that I recommend you watch it is like, okay, like I recommend you get, like, you know, good pizza that's stuffed crust. Like, this shit doesn't matter, right? To say that I recommend you watch this is just like not even, it's not even the proper language to use to convey how highly I recommend this show. Like, watch this fucking show. It's perfect. It is a perfect show. Like, and I'm a piece of shit, man. Like, and I think this show, like, I'm telling you, if I was a crier, this show would get me. Like, if it was something that I could do, this show would get me. It's amazing. But moving on from that aspect of it, I do want to talk about some of the other things that make this show great. The characters themselves. So I've already talked about the character development, but like the uniqueness of each character. And when I say the uniqueness, again, a lot of shows can have unique characters, but each of the core 4 people in this family are very distinctive from the others. And I don't just mean that in like, okay, yeah, there's the father, there's the mother. I mean, like, Eugene Levy, you've probably seen him in a bunch of other things, most notably probably as the father in American Pie. his style, like, and this is something that they actually talked about in the little documentary thing that I watched afterwards. Dan Levy talked about this, is how important the fashion is in this show. And that's not something I look for or that I catch very often, but that's something that I noticed on this show far prior to me seeing it on this little documentary thing last night. The way they dress, it gives you further insight into who they are. You see this a lot with Catherine O'Hara's Moira Rose. You see this a lot with Dan Levy's David Rose. You see this a lot with Alexis Rose. Like you see just like the outfits help you understand the characters more. And then it gets to a point where like you almost are like subconsciously anticipating what they will wear when you start an episode. Like, what's David gonna have on today? I know I did, because I'm like, David wears some weird shit, man. I'm like, let me see what David's gonna wear today. That aspect of it. And then that aspect of these characters, I think, is an aspect that is undervalued, but I think that did have an impact on how we accept these characters and how we see them. They grow over the course of time. Like the concept of the show, which I have not talked about yet, because again, my mind is so jumbled because I'm still trying to just articulate how much I love this show, but. The concept of the show is that these are a family of four who were filthy fucking rich. They lose all their money and they are forced to move to this rural town called Schitt's Creek with a bunch of people that they would otherwise would be looking down on. And these people come off pretty repulsive at the start of the show, very unlikable. And as they get integrated with the town and the residents, and they start to kind of like accept that that's where they are, and we see them grow from being like kind of like shitty people to good people and interesting people and well-meaning people and entertaining people. And it's really great to watch these characters grow over the course of these seasons. And then one of the last things I want to talk about as far as characters go, and I this is definitely a save the best for last kind of deal here. Catherine O'Hara, man, wow. I've never seen anything like Moira Rose. I will never see anything else like Moira Rose. You've never seen anything like Moira Rose. What an incredible character. And maybe for me, like the things about Moira that makes her funny, I think are things that impact me a little bit more than they might your average viewer. Like a lot of people might, think like, oh, that's kind of fun. But like for me, Moira's character is so unique and so fascinating that it's like literally anytime she opens her mouth, I laugh, because it's like right down to like her voice, the inflection, the accent that she uses, the vocabulary that she uses, like the personality of Moira herself. Like what an insane, like I don't understand how you slide the script for this show to Catherine O'Hara and this is what she gives you. Like what a mind she must have, because there's no way, I do not believe that Dan Levy wrote that character and upon reading this script or reading about this character, all of these things that Catherine O'Hara does were conveyed in this, and that she picked up like, okay, I need to talk funny, I need to have like a wild vocabulary, like I need to like all of these different things that she did in this performance. I doubt these were things that were on the page. I think these are things that Catherine O'Hara said, this is what I think this character would do. This is how I think this character would talk. This is how I think this character would interact. And I think a lot of that is Catherine O'Hara. And I'm guessing here because I've watched very little kind of like behind the scenes stuff about the show, which that will change very soon. But it's amazing. Like I've never seen anything like it. And that's again, how many times have I said I've never seen anything like this? Like that's why I love this show so much. Like it totally knocks my socks off. Every fucking episode, hilarious. And like I said, building up to these big emotional, grandiose kind of moments where it's like this is a like television show. Like, what are you doing right now? Being so brave and brilliant and insightful and creative and having so much heart. Like, how do you do all of these things? And it's really amazing. And when we talk about these guys winning these Emmys, my God, do they deserve them? Even Annie Murphy, who plays Alexis on the show, Alexis in the first season, I'm like, why are you here? Like, Alexis is not entertaining to me at all. And Alexis, throughout the course of the show, just again evolves into such an enjoyable character in her own way, because she just made this. Annie Murphy made this character, and it's brilliant. Like, they do so much great stuff. I think one of the last things I want to talk about with the show is, on one viewing, because I will be watching this show all the time until I die. I will be watching this show. It's one of those ones, it's not going to go away. I watch The Simpsons still all the time. I watch The Fresh Prince all the time. I think that's kind of it, but there's still The Office. I watch The Office all the time. Schitt's Creek will enter into that realm as well, as one that I watch all the time. And I'm never going to stop watching this. But after this first viewing of the show, I already had moments where I was like, okay, this is some shit that's already sticking with me, right? So over 6 seasons, there's a ton. I laughed so many times watching this show, but there are a couple of moments that really stand out to me. And I'm going to talk about one of them briefly because it's not particularly a spoiler, but I think it just kind of goes to show the brilliance in the writing of this show. And it wasn't just me that thought this moment was impactful or well done. It was talked about in the documentary thing that I watched as well. But David Rose, I believe this is at the end of season 1, he has a conversation in a store with another character on the show, and they talk about sexuality in vague terms. And in this case, well, not in vague terms on the show as a whole. In this specific conversation, they were talking about sexuality in vague terms. They were referring to it as wine. And one of the characters says, I like this kind of wine, and I always thought that you liked this kind of wine. And it turns out I might be wrong about that. And wine, in this case, refers to the type of person you have sex with. So her saying, I've always liked red wine, is her saying, I've always liked men. And then she goes, I always thought you liked red wine too, aka I always thought you liked men. But so I'm explaining it more than it should be explained. But for the purpose of this, it's a conversation about sexuality and used in wine terms. And David replies, explaining through wine his sexuality. And I thought it was a brilliant metaphor that puts sexual preference so plainly but very profoundly. And he ends by saying, I like wine but not the label. And I thought that was so, what is that, like? That's like 6 words or some shit. Like, and to explain an open sexuality in a way of just like, hey, I don't care about whether or not you have this form of genitalia, or whether you are into this sort of thing, or who you were, or who you are. I just like fucking. Like, that's, I like that. I thought that was an incredible metaphor, and I thought it was an incredible moment. And that was the moment where I said I really like this show. Because after that episode was over, I turned to my wife and I was like, I thought that wine metaphor, I told her, I was like, whoever wrote that wine metaphor is a fucking genius. Because that was a brilliant exchange there. And they talked about that in the documentary thing that I watched. Another moment that I really liked that stuck out to me that I still think about, and I'm sure when I watch it another time, there'll probably be another moment or several that maybe surpass this one. But this is one that I just found hilarious in the moment, and now, however many seasons later, now that I'm done with the show, I still find it hilarious. But there's a moment where David and Moira are trying to cook enchiladas, and there's a whole situation about folding in the cheese. And I watched the folding in the cheese scene again last night because it was in the documentary, I believe, and then I watched it again today before I started doing that. And I'm just like, that scene was so fucking funny, and it's funny for very unique and interesting reasons. Just kind of like, sometimes it's like, you find humor in some like slapstick, somebody gets hurt, or you find humor in a clever pun or something like that. But I don't know. It's just, maybe it's just the performances from the two, the dynamic between these two. I don't know. I thought that scene was hilarious, and it's one of my favorite scenes of the show for humor reasons. As far as like depth goes, and again, these big powerful moments that I talked about, I'm not going to spoil the big powerful moments by any means, but there are conversations that happen between David and his partner on this show that again are just incredibly profound, powerful, emotional, that I've never seen this type of conversation conveyed in this type of way on a TV show before. Like I said, again, it feels very brave to discuss these things in a way that's not look at what we're discussing. It's more like these are just how these two characters interact and how they behave, and they love each other, and this is how this is really how people interact in real life. It's not some like movie shit that's like not believable or completely off the wall. It's natural, it feels real, and that to me is amazing, because I've never been unable to detach myself from the material. Like, I can always look at it and be like, that was a good scene. But with this show, the scenes are so good and so well done and feel so real that I would be surprised if these two are not actually dating. Because like, if you're not dating, like, what the fuck, man? Like, I find your fake relationship to be one of the most beautiful things I've seen on television history. This relationship between these two men, and like, if this is just acting, I'm gonna be kind of disappointed. Like, I want you guys to be together. So like, it's an amazing show. So I don't think I have too much more on my list here that I wanted to go over. I think I've covered everything. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else I want to go over. So I'm going to wrap this one up. I'm pulling up on half an hour, so I don't want to keep you guys any longer than I need to, but I'll just close out by saying, by repeating, I think this is probably the best comedy I've ever seen in my life. And it's one of the best shows I've ever seen. And I will speak its praises for the rest of my life with no for comedy qualifiers. It's a remarkable and brilliant piece of work, and Dan Levy and anyone else involved in its creation should be, and I'm sure they are, incredibly proud of themselves, because they created something really special. So I don't know any other ways to further recommend this show. Watch the fucking show. You won't regret it. Peace.